Jumia locks in $50 million in a fresh equity round, with IFC leading the round at a $25 million investment. And now Jumia's promise is that it will be profitable in 2027. Airtel switches on satellite to mobile services in the DRC. You do not need towers or dishes, you just need a signal and you're done. Africa's developers are quietly ditching Silicon Valley, choosing cheap, open Chinese AI models instead. And Absa Bank has put AI and OCR to work, cutting debt review turnaround from days to hours. These and more stories on tech and innovation in Africa. Welcome to the Tech Tides Africa podcast. My name is Karen, and I am really excited for today's show. Kelvin, how are you?
I'm okay, I guess.
Oh my god. How can I say I'm excited for today's show and you're okay, you guess?
I mean, I have a stuffy nose this morning, but so it's I don't know. It's just not the best way to start the week. So yeah, that's why I'm supposed to be good, but yeah, that makes me okay. Yeah, I believe it'll get better as the day continues. But yeah, interesting stories on the podcast, of course. Jumia is back in the news, so and is back in the news for a positive thing. So yeah, I'm up for it.
Yeah, I think we can start with a story that will encourage you and probably excite you, hopefully, because as you all know, Jumia is Kelvin's favorite African child. It is his firstborn son. Nothing excites him more than Jumia. And they have just raised $50 million in a fresh equity round. And IFC, which is owned by the World Bank, is anchoring this round with a 25 USD million investment. Existing shareholders and a few investors are filling in the rest. This is Jumia's first raise. Of course, we know they are already public, so they are raising money outside of that. And that tells us that they're not necessarily looking for growth, they are looking to stabilize their balance sheet. I'd like to hear more from you, Kelvin, because as we all know, this is your favorite topic. If we could talk about Jumia every week, it would make you happy. So, your thoughts on this? And of course, the promise for profitability. We've been following their story for a few years now, and they've slowly been walking towards profitability, and now we have a promise of profitability in 2027. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, anyone that listens to the podcast would think I know someone at Jumia, but funny enough, I don't. I don't know why I started to follow up with this company and started to like this company, and I'm a big fan. But yeah, it just happened at some point, and we have been tracking them for quite a while now in their push for profitability, and they have been cutting their losses every quarter. And I believe I saw in Q2 of 2026, it came down to I think between 10 and $15 million. And not long after those reports came out, they announced this raise. And for me, it's a positive because for a while they have been trying to optimize for profitability and been leaving different markets that have not been working for them. And I think they also had some layoffs at some point. I mean, they also had Jumia Food from a couple of years ago that they had to turn down, even though it was quite a popular product, but it was just not making money. So for them now to be able to raise funding at this point, it does inspire some confidence because at some point I was wondering whether they would see another e-commerce giant fall. But yeah, when I see them raising $50 million in funding, equity funding, then I know okay, the investors are definitely looking at all of these things that have been happening over the last year or two and looking at balance sheet and saying, okay, I think now is a good time to take a bet on Jumia. And so yeah, it inspires confidence and that makes me believe profitability. like they say, is achievable by next year. So yeah, happy days, happy days.
Yeah, I'm truly convinced that you are somehow a shareholder in Jumia. I will start researching. You must have some shares in this company. But I do agree, we've seen them go through a journey since 2022, 2023 of stabilizing their operations, reducing their costs. I think in 2022, 2023 is where we saw a lot of operational losses and quite a lot of pressure on the books, and they started to aggressively cut down a lot of things. We saw Jumia Foods being closed down in 7 countries. We saw them lay off a few hundred staff. And then they began to exit markets like Algeria, Tunisia, South Africa to focus on markets that were promising. And then 2024, 2025, we begin to see them shift a little bit some of their models, business models. For example, the buying and selling of goods first party retail model, they started to move to high margin third party marketplace model. They began to reduce their overheads. They began to focus on high demand, profitable categories, and also to focus on they continue to focus on the high return markets. And then now this year we're seeing the push to break even and then move into profitability. So it has been a journey that I think that's why perhaps they're such a favorite for us, because we've watched them take a journey to stabilize, make very difficult decisions to stay the course. And of course, our hope is that we will see an e commerce giant go through the test of time and survive. So, definitely looking forward to see them break even and go profitable. And I do believe that that will happen with this push that has come, this financial injection, capital injection that has come, will definitely enable them to strengthen their balance sheet and then pave the way for their first profitable quarter. So, really exciting.
Yeah, I'm hoping that they don't now start to make some crazy decisions now that some funding has come on board. But yeah, if they continue on the path they currently are, making the tough decisions, like you said, they are definitely going to hit profitability by next year. Moving on to Airtel. I think earlier in the year we talked about Airtel and Starlink going into a partnership that would bring satellite to mobile service. And at the time, the discussions were happening to do this in Kenya. But last week, we saw them launch a pilot program for these satellites to mobile service in DRC. And yeah, from Kenya to DRC. Why they went with DRC was because of the geography. It's a smaller population, and apparently the coverage for 2G is at 77%, 3G 68%, and 4G 57%. So when you look at the fact that 2G is still at 77%, it says quite a lot. And so internet penetration is quite tricky because there are a lot of areas that are hard for traditional telcos to reach because of the terrain. But with this direct to mobile service, your phone is now a satellite, so you can connect directly to the internet. At the moment, the reports are saying that it would service light internet usage, so things like WhatsApp and maybe light browsing and things like that. But I'm curious to see the potential of how fast it could become because we know how fast the Starlink kits get. So I'm very curious to see people start to do the comparisons between this satellites to mobile versus having the traditional dish connection. I believe that one will always be faster, but I want to see what the gap would be. So very interesting development.
Yeah, I truly agree with you. I think how efficient it will be, the quality of the service might be what breaks the camel. but we have to wait and see. I haven't personally used Starlink, so I don't know, but I do think that the vastness of DRC is an issue. And I think also the fact that it is the terrain itself, it's a very forest dense, remote, the majority of it is remote. When you look at places like Kenya, for example, maybe Nigeria as well, while there's a lot of remote areas, there's a lot of development even in those remote spaces. Now, for Kenya, for example, we went through, I can't remember what that thing was called, where different towns, we got into counties as opposed to provinces, and then each county has a governor and all of that. So there's a lot of development in the grassroots because there are mini governments for those counties. Devolution, thank you, I've remembered. We went through devolution at some point, and that devolution has brought a lot of development in even the rural setups where even my parents live in the middle of nowhere. I mean, elephants come to our land. Sometimes lions will escape somewhere and you hear there are lions around and you have to be careful. But we have infrastructure for Wi-Fi there, you know? So there's a lot of development that has happened as a result of devolution. Now, we all know that DRC is still trying to stabilize as a country, which it creates a lot of friction for rural development. So I do understand why they have such a low concentration because, first of all, the vastness of the land, it's very expensive to set up the infrastructure. But also, I believe because it's still stabilizing, that development is going to take time. So I think this is a shortcut for them and it will be very helpful. I do think that even if the connectivity will not be as good as where there's infrastructure, it's better than nothing because they have to start somewhere. And I do think that satellite will continue to improve as we go. The technology will continue to improve as we go. And it will be very helpful for countries that are still trying to catch up with the development of probably the big four in Africa. So I'm quite excited. Obviously, I think this is going to be the future going forward. We're seeing Amazon coming in. Amazon Leo is right on the heels of Starlink, and we're going to see more and more of this coming up. And I think as it does, given the terrain of Africa as a continent, we will see the improvement of satellite efficiency, and then even more, it will serve even more rural spaces.
I agree with you. I was going to make a joke on lions and elephants, but I think I'll leave it for offline. Um,
Leave our lions alone.
yeah, Starlink and Ethel, this is definitely one of those developments that, like you said, 10-20% is better than 0%. Essentially, it's better to have access to the internet, and we know the developments that come with having the access to the internet. We do what we do at the moment via, some internet connection. So it really bridges the gap when it comes to the digital developments. And yeah, once you have access, I'm very curious to see how this pilot program turns out in DRC, given the terrain is so difficult to plant traditional telco infrastructure. Well, satellite kind of bypasses that barrier. So definitely interested to see how this pilot program works out. And I can be pessimistic sometimes, but this is one of those times I'm actually optimistic too that this works, and we can now start to see more of it across.
Yeah, absolutely. I do hope that it works. I think the future of work and where we're seeing work going, the more connectivity you have as a country and as a continent, the better it will be for us going forward. Now, right on that and the beauty of connectivity, we move to a story where I want to keep quiet more and listen to you because you're actually in this space as a developer. I'm not a developer, I'm just a writer who, by the grace of God, understands tech. But African developers seem to be choosing AI models over US Silicon Valley AI models. They are moving because it seems that Chinese models are cheaper and it's easier to actually gain access. The Chinese models now account for roughly half of the usage on Open Router, which I hope you will explain to us what that is, up from a quarter a year ago. And 19 of the top 25 most downloaded models on Hugging Face are Chinese built. The reason for this is cost and control. So when you have models like Qwen and DeepSeek, you can run up to 90% cheaper, according to some developers. And then you can fine tune it freely and come without so much approval frictions that you will probably come up against with US platforms. So there seems to be a shift with developers, and I'd like to hear more from you why you think this is happening from a developer's seat. Why are we moving more towards Chinese AI models? Because for some of us who are not in the developer space, we're probably more on the US models, Anthropic, OpenAI. That's where we are more located. But it seems developers are moving to other spaces. Why is that?
Yeah, I mean, you touched on the major driver for this, cost, and cost is the major driver really when you want to develop an AI based service or integrate some form of AI smart into an application that you're building. You can either use the Western models like Anthropic and OpenAI, or you have the Chinese based models. There are quite a number of them. I think DeepSeek is the most popular one, but you have Qwen and Kimi as well that are picking up steam. And the advantage you get with some of these Chinese based models are you can pretty much download them because they are open source. So you can download them and run them for free. So this is a very big incentive for developers in Africa. I was trying to build a personal AI assistant a couple of months back, and I was trying to build this on a Raspberry Pi, and I tried using Gemini with it, and I understood the cost very quickly, and I switched to I believe it was Qwen at the time because of the limitations of the Raspberry Pi model I was using, and it basically does the job for your niche use case. Now at scale, that could be a different thing, and that's I think the second element of these things. The African developers are looking at what they are building, and does it need these heavy Western models that, of course, they are quite powerful and can do a lot, but do I need all of that for what I am currently building? Not necessarily. I think that's where African developers are looking at the cost and then moving over to these Chinese based models. Of course, you have to host those models by yourself and you still bear some cost there. But when you compare it to trying to use something like OpenAI, it's just way, way cheaper. And so that's really what it comes down to. It comes down to cost, it comes down to scale, the scale at which they are using it. And then also there's the third element, control. When I have the model, I can, since it's open source, I can download it. If I can download it, it means I can tweak it and customize it to work specific for my specific use case. And that gives you a lot more control than you would get with a Western model. So I think those are the three elements of it.
Yeah, I don't think I have anything to add. What you've said, yes.
Yeah. So it's one that would be interesting to see how it works. Our next story is also an AI story. So I wonder if they are using one of these Chinese models or are they using a Western model. But yeah, it's as a developer at the moment you're trying to do anything AI based in Africa, you would naturally just move towards the Chinese models. And moving on to our next story, APSA has deployed AI to speed up the debt review process. And of course, we are beginning to see a lot of applications of AI on the podcast. We have talked about a number of use cases for them. In this case, APSA Bank has integrated this AI and optical character recognition solution within its debt review operations. Now, this is a point I would allow you to do more of the talking because I would like to hear from you what the normal debt review operation is and how can AI step in and help improve and speed up that process, because it's one thing I believe last week we talked about banks being more open to use other data points outside of salary and things like that to give loans. And so I'm curious to see how AI can come in to improve this debt review process. So now I would hand over to you to let us know what are the internals of what is the manual process like, and then how does AI speed.
Yeah. So one thing is a lot of these things are super still very manual in the banking space because there's a lot of human judgment that is required. Now, I do agree that there's a part of the process. I've personally not worked in debt review, but I do believe what APSA is doing makes absolute sense because they're removing the repetitive part of the process and allowing their staff to focus on client engagement and activities that require human judgment. When you're going through debt review, you need to assess the client. Lions alone. How regular they are. There are some nuances to it. So you're looking at what their income is, what their expenses are, what their current debt is. And then there's a threshold for each country as to how much percentage of a person's income can be used to repay debt, and you can't go beyond that. Now, the last time I checked, I think you cannot go past a third of someone's income in debt repayment. So if I am earning 10,000 shillings, let's say, I can't pay more than 3K per month to debt. So there are those things that need to be checked and reviewed. Now, if you have debt and you're unable to pay, then there's a process that needs to be looked at, starting with the assessment to see how much are you making, what are your expenses, how much debt do you currently have. And then there goes into the negotiation point of it where we're trying to see how do we resolve this debt that you're not able to pay? How do we restructure? Which is something that a lot of banks will tell you. For example, you have a certain amount of money that you haven't paid, so you agree how much are you able to pay every month, and so they restructure the debt so that you're able to pay. So they increase the period where you will pay, then there's the interest, and then they figure out how much can you afford on a monthly basis so that they do not overstretch you and you're able to pay the debt. Then you begin to reduce to make the payment. So that's usually a whole process. Now, I think AI becomes handy when it comes to the assessment part of it and also the restructuring part of it, where it's not so manual, you have to input things. It just looks at their income, their expenses, their current debt, how much are they making, what could comfortably be repaid within the interest period and within the regulations of how long someone can take to pay a debt. Because for some loans you can't go beyond 20 years, for some you can't go beyond 5 years. It depends on the regulations around the type of debt that you have. So I think AI is able to calculate all that so that as the debt review employee, I can focus on negotiating with the client, understanding where the issues are, and helping them in the negotiation process to make a decision when it comes to the restructuring. I do think it's a really brilliant use of AI. I like what they said. They echoed something that the CEO of, I think, Fuzu, I think she's the CEO, said. And what she said was, AI will not, which is something that has been said over and over again, AI will not necessarily remove jobs, it will create new kinds of jobs and new ways of working. So I do think this is a brilliant example of AI refining the way that we have been working. And it's not necessarily, which is something that has been echoed by ABSA, they're not trying to replace their workers. They're removing the repetitive work so that their workers can focus on what's important. And brilliant use of AI.
Mm. Yeah, really brilliant use of AI, and thank you for explaining a lot of that process. This is one of the cases where it doesn't seem AI replaced people or made some people go out of jobs, because from the article I saw, some of the employees were worried about that. But it's working alongside the debt review officer, so it's quite cool. And yeah, hopefully we keep on seeing more interesting use cases for AI, and the fear of AI taking your job starts to come down a bit, because earlier in the year it was rough, especially on social media. It was just doomsday. And things have now begun to quiet down, and we are seeing more use cases that are not displacing people. So it's good for now. It's good for now. Maybe in a couple of years, maybe by next year, we'll start to have another wave of, oh, AI is taking our jobs again. But at least it's good to have a break for now. I'm with the employees of APSA on this one. It's cool to not have AI breathing over my neck for a bit. Yeah.
I think for us as writers, AI was worse than for anyone else. What? And some of us did lose jobs to AI, but I think we're
Yeah.
calming down a little bit now, and the fog is starting to clear. And I think people are starting to understand that the same way calculators came and redefined how we do mathematics, AI will simply redefine how we work, but the human will always be at the center of life. And so
Yeah.
we will find a way to make sure that we stay relevant. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's a good point to end the podcast today. Yeah, very interesting. Jumia is back in the news. Of course, I would end it on Jumia.
Really?
AI
Jumia, you
can
need
go and
to
sit
call
down.
this man. Call Kelvin on the side. Jumia people, call Kelvin.
One of these days. One of these days. Anyways, thank you for listening, and see you same time next week.